So a lot of things to sift through when it comes to ceasefire talk. We know that a ceasefire, such a bullshit word, a ceasefire has been agreed upon, the deal was signed, it goes into effect, it's 3 phases, and it goes into effect on Sunday. A couple things that I think are important to keep in mind. One being that there has always been this very coordinated effort to disconnect Gaza from the rest of Palestine. I've talked about this before, but it's important to do a refresher every once in a while. Pay attention to the headlines. When you read mainstream news about what's happening in Gaza, Palestine, the way that they refer to the genocide, in addition to calling it a conflict and everything else except what it actually is, which is a genocide, they are consistently referring to it as Israel-Hamas war or Israel-Gaza war, never Israel-Palestine, and that's for a reason. Regardless of potential disagreements between different factions of Palestinian resistance, they're all fighting for the same thing, which is a free and liberated Palestine from the river to the sea. All of Palestine. This includes Gaza, this includes the West Bank, and this includes all of 1948 Palestine that is now considered Israel. Consistently referring to what's happening in Gaza as the Israel-Gaza or Israel-Hamas war is a way to disconnect Gaza from the rest of Palestine. They even do it when they refer to Palestinians from Gaza. They call them Gazans in media. Palestinians in Gaza are Palestinians. The media calling them Gazans is a way for them to disconnect Palestinians in Gaza from Palestinians in the West Bank and Palestinians in 48 territory. Israel and Israeli politicians didn't just wake up one day and decide that it was time to stop bombing Palestinians. They also didn't just decide to care about the hostages. Israel doesn't agree to anything unless it's beneficial for Israel. Having the hostages returned to their homes safely, where they can talk about how terrified they were about being under Israeli bombardment for almost 500 days, is not beneficial to Israel. Making a deal with an arm of resistance as a nuclear superpower is not beneficial for Israel. It's actually embarrassing and shows how much they've been losing. Now, while this ceasefire deal doesn't explicitly include language about annexing areas of the West Bank, there has been some online chatter that alludes to the idea that Israeli officials have entertained getting more land throughout occupied Palestine in exchange for this ceasefire deal in Gaza. The continued illegal theft of Palestinian land and the continued illegal kidnapping of Palestinians. Remember, since October 7th of 2023, there have been over 11,000 Palestinians throughout the West Bank and occupied Jerusalem that have been kidnapped by Israel and thrown into Israeli prisons illegally, is why October 7th happened in the first place. Making sure that you don't know where to mentally place all of that information and keeping it disconnected, keeping Gaza disconnected from the rest of Palestine, ensures that when the ceasefire hopefully takes into effect this coming Sunday, you can't register that when Israel continues kidnapping Palestinians from the rest of Palestine, and when it continues to steal more Palestinian land and forcibly displacing Palestinians in occupied Palestine, the West Bank, and in 48 territories, you don't get mad about it because you've already disconnected the fact that Gaza is a part of Palestine. Your brain can't register that even though Israel might not be bombing Gaza anymore, hopefully they won't be bombing Gaza anymore, they are still in breach of the ceasefire agreement because they are still continuing to kidnap Palestinians and steal Palestinian land, which is why we kept saying in the beginning of the genocide in 2023 that Palestinian voices should be your center, because we know how to make sure that all eyes are on all of Palestine all the time. We don't disconnect Gaza from the rest of Palestine. We know that Israel is a shady bitch and will be in breach of the ceasefire agreement very quickly somewhere else in Palestine. And we know that the media will do everything it can to ensure that you only think that a ceasefire means no more bombs being dropped on Gaza, when in actuality, we always know that whatever deal is on the table and whatever deal is being made means more Palestinian lives being lost, more Palestinian land being stolen, and it's never for the benefit of Palestinian sovereignty. So it's really, really important that we continue to ensure in our minds and in conversations that we're having having with our circles, that we are always remembering that Gaza is a city in Palestine, and Israel has declared war on all of Palestine and all Palestinians. They are attempting to steal all of Palestine, all Palestinian land, and they are attempting to erase all Palestinians. And the last thing I'll say is don't forget to weed through media's typical bullshit of the words that they choose to use when describing Palestinians versus Israelis, and the dehumanizing language that they choose to assign us and our children, and the victimizing language that they choose to strategically assign to Israelis. They are not Palestinian prisoners, they are Palestinian hostages. They don't use the word minors when it comes to Israeli children, they use the word kids or children, so they are Palestinian children. And they would never say Israeli females and males, they would say Israeli women and men. They are Palestinian women and men. They are Palestinian men, women, and children being held hostage by Israel. In the coming days and weeks and months, we're about to find out who actually became radicalized with all of this education that Palestinians have been offering the world for free on the internet. Time to show us what you learned.